Have you ever looked back at the incredibly long, complicated stretch of human history, or honestly just flipped on the evening news today, and thought to yourself, why does everything look like a giant, tangled mess? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we are unpacking a really fascinating philosophical framework that attempts to answer exactly that. We're going to explore a concept by the thinker Zhu Feng, who maps out what he sees as a literal 9-tier cascade of human devolution.
Feng starts his entire analysis by asking one absolutely fundamental question. Where do the problems actually lie? He points out that the universe itself operates in perfect order, right? Seasons change right on time, galaxies spin predictably. So does human society just have to forever remain a tangled mess? Are we doomed to repeat our mistakes, or can we actually organize this chaos into something that makes sense?
To understand his answer, we'll follow this specific agenda today. First, we'll look at 1. The tangled mess. Then move down into 2, the cosmic foundations. Descend into 3, the rise of rules. Explore 4, the modern cogs. And finally, hit rock bottom with 5, the final descent. It's literally a step-by-step journey from perfect order all the way down to societal collapse.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the tangled mess, defining the human condition. Here, Zhu Feng impartially maps out the root causes behind our current societal state by outlining 9 specific downward stages.
Which brings us to Section 2, the cosmic foundations, the era of spiritual order. Because to really grasp how far we've fallen in this framework, we first have to look at the very top of the hierarchy. At the absolute peak of existence, we have the Tao. The source defines the Tao as the spirit or consciousness of the greatest creator, basically the non-material force governing the evolution and laws of the entire universe. Zhu Feng argues that when humanity prioritizes the Tao above all else, the result is absolute, perfect harmony. Everything just works. It leads to peace, natural modesty, and total alignment. It's the ultimate peak.
But let's see how this builds and eventually starts to unravel. Prioritizing the Tao gave us peace and natural harmony, but the first step down the staircase is prioritizing virtue. According to the author, when humanity forsakes the ultimate Tao, they turn to virtue instead, shifting society into an era dominated by religion. The mindset becomes entirely focused on seeking God's and divine blessings, and while society still functions pretty effectively, that pure, direct cosmic connection gets diluted.
But what happens next is a much steeper drop. The author starkly notes, and I quote, "When humanity abandons both Tao and virtue in favor of law, humanity plunges into a phase of frenzied development." Now, by law here, he means gods, spirits, and demons actually utilizing the Tao for their own abilities. This brings about an era of rising warlords, war, plundering, the intense destruction of nature. It all becomes completely unavoidable, completely shattering that original spiritual order.
And that drops us right into Section 3, the rise of rules, replacing spirit with structure. With those deep cosmic connections totally severed, humanity is basically left scrambling to figure out how to survive using only human-made codes.
We see this unfold in a rapid 3-step sequence of new rules. Step 1 is benevolence. This is an internal standard sages use to try and restrain people. Step 2 is righteousness, focusing on noble outward behavior. And Step 3 is rituals, which are simply methods used by rulers to maintain control over the masses. Each step down represents humanity trying desperately to replace our lost spirituality with sheer, rigid structure.
Now, benevolence, righteousness, and rituals, they sound pretty great on paper, right? But Zhu Feng maps them to increasingly negative outcomes. Benevolence actually ends up leading to cunning and sophistry as people just manipulate those internal standards. Righteousness, that fractures society into self-centered factions all fighting for their own interests. And rituals lead directly to oppression, deceit, and widespread opportunism, where everyone is just climbing over each other to get ahead.
That dog-eat-dog mentality transitions us seamlessly into Section 4, the modern cogs, shrewdness, and systems. And this tier is going to feel eerily resonant with our modern era. It's driven strictly by individual survival.
In this stage, we hit wisdom. But actually, scratch that. In this specific philosophical framework, wisdom is not some Zen state of enlightenment. Far from it. It's the cleverness and ingenuity acquired by common people purely for survival. It's a shrewd, self-serving cleverness where people fight tooth and nail for personal gain rather than any kind of universal harmony.
The imagery the author uses to describe this era is literally wild. He says there is a constant striving for personal gain. Lies fill the streets, and faith is completely lost. He points out that people's small minds are incredibly bright with petty, self-serving calculations, while their large minds are totally foolish. Ultimately, humans become so shrewd and faithless that they start to resemble ghosts and demons.
So you might be wondering, how do a bunch of untrustworthy, ghost-like humans survive together without just destroying each other? Well, we invent trust, or credibility. Because no one naturally trusts anyone anymore, trust becomes this mutually binding covenant we devise simply to maintain some kind of orderly life. We are literally forced to invent complex systems just to bind ourselves together.
So the crucial point here is that trust doesn't actually save us, it traps us. The text powerfully notes that everyone becomes a cog in society's machinery, struggling and fighting, yet finding it challenging to realize their noble ideals. This translates to an endless multiplication of constitutions, laws, rules, and just suffocating bureaucracy. It strips away our genuine human nature, turning everyone into exhausted little cogs in a massive, uncaring machine.
Which means we've finally reached Section 5, the final descent, the collapse into superstition. We have officially arrived at the absolute rock bottom of Shufeng's 9-tier staircase.
The final, 9th stage is called magical art. This is defined as a trick played by lower-class individuals just to highlight themselves through abnormal channels. By this point, society has completely abandoned all previous structures. The perfect cosmic Tao? Gone. Benevolence? Gone. Even the rigid bureaucratic laws of trust are gone. It's all tossed out in favor of cheap tricks and bizarre behavior just to get ahead of the next person.
Now, what's really interesting about this final stage is how reality is totally inverted. Superstition completely prevails. Falsehoods and evil actually replace truth and goodness. Humans are acting as if they are literally under a spell, running around, shouting, causing chaos. And according to Shufeng's stark analysis, once we hit this point, humanity is virtually beyond remedy.
Taking a step back to view this entire cascade of chaos, we can really trace a sobering timeline. We drop sharply from that initial perfect era of the Tao, plummet into the frenzied era of law, descend further into the oppressive era of rituals, step down into the exhausting machine-like era of trust, and finally crash headfirst into the irremediable chaos of magical art. It is a stunning, sweeping view of human devolution.
And that brings us right back to the author's final, incredibly provocative question. Isn't this the cause of human history and its current state? I want you to really ponder this unique philosophical lens today. Does this 9-tier descent actually explain the tangled mess of the world around us? It is certainly a fascinating way to organize the chaos of the human timeline. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the frameworks that build our world.